I've worked with people and with ceremony and with chant for a very, very long time indeed. I pioneered the whole working with sound as a healing modality in the West, both here, both in Europe, in America, and really all over the world. And what I found is that it's very important to work ceremonially. So, you know, in our culture, traditionally, if in a traditional marriage, you would invite all your social context. You'd invite your friends and your family and all the people you know from all throughout your childhood, your adulthood, your time at school or college or whatever. And they all come together. And they all witness you going from being unmarried to being married. So nowadays, it's very popular to have destination marriages. People go off to exotic places and they get married underwater, or they maybe invite the odd person, or maybe they don't, and they come back and they tell their friends, you know, we're married, and they say, oh, really? So what? And the point about these transitional events are that you are witnessed going from one state to another, you know, going from, in this case, being unmarried to being married. And so there was a research program done to find out the correlations between what happened to people and what went into the longevity of a marriage. And they considered all the factors, you know, how big the cake was, whether the family knew each other for a long time before or not at all, or how long the people had known each other, how big the wedding was, how many people they invited, how much money they spent on the wedding, how big the ring was, you know, all the kind of ingredients that go into a wedding. And then they did the correlation between these factors and how long the marriage lasted. And how much money was spent on the wedding was negative. You know, it had a negative effect on the length of time. But how many people were invited to the wedding was the only real correlation which went into feeding the longevity of the marriage. In other words, the more people who witnessed the couple going from being unmarried to being married, the longer the marriage, the correlation between the length of the marriage. And so this supports completely my experience, which is that if you want to make changes in your life, you need people who witness you going from how you were to how you become. Because otherwise you go back into your societal context and people always assume that you were how you were, and they reinforce that. And so it's very hard to sustain the new you. Whereas if you're witnessed, then you know that they know that you know that they know that there's no going back. And so what I found is that it's very important to work ceremonially so that you have witnesses witnessing you going from here to there. And so I like to work like that. And so when I'm doing what I call, and what has become called, family constellations, is to do them ceremonially. And so how I work is that people choose other people to represent members of their families, and then you see the family through time and space. So not just a small window of was I loved or not. It's nothing to do with whether you were loved or not loved, or more or less than your siblings, but it's about seeing the family through the eyes of all members and seeing the family through time. And so these representatives, when chosen to represent a member of your family, if they try to act what they think that person is, an angry father or an angry mother, the work stops. But if they just let themselves go and be open vessels, they find themselves becoming like that person and acting like that person, speaking like that person. And so the whole thing begins to unfold. So people choose people to represent these family members, and then the whole thing unfolds, and I put together the connections that I see and really follow the stream of novelty in its moment of revelation without any anticipation or ideas about how it ought to be or should have been, but just dancing with this revelation of novelty in such a way that the outliers are honored and people who've forgotten remembered, and the whole thing comes together, and there's a kind of induction of order which changes everything for everybody.